We're live. Oh, wait. No, we're not. Just kidding. What's up, people? We're back. I'm feeling like a major sense of deja vu because I think this is like the third thing of these that I've had to record within like the course of 3 days. So I'm sorry.
I've been doing a live stream every night.
They're all starting to just
weekend.
like blend together. You know, I'm starting to fall into that trap of what day is it again? I'm so glad that I have my calendar hanging right there. It makes it really easy.
Hey man, I'd rather be busy creating content than like working a 9 to 5 or something.
Oh, me too. Absolutely. Like no question.
Complain.
Like I finally worked my 9 to 5 again yesterday, and I'm like, this is horrible. And I only had to work it for 2 days. Then again, I was also coming off of a week with no power, so you had that little tidbit to add to it. So again, what's up, people? Welcome back to the show. Our next official actual podcast episode here on the Talkin TV channel. There, that little logo right there. I'm Dom, the movie nerd. That's Chris, the TV nerd. Welcome back. And Chris, last week we had a pretty niche episode for another segment that was very special to both of our childhoods. And now we're kind of tackling the opposite perspective today. We're still keeping it within the realm of animation. That seems to be a little bit of a common theme so far this month. Who knows if it'll continue to be the common theme for the rest of the month, but we're doing something now. I would say that more so is familiar to you than me, you know, like we were both pretty well versed with the Transformers lore, but now we're getting into a studio that you, opposite of our Watchmen watch along, have been trying to get me to go with for some time now.
Yeah. I gotta say, one of the places I want to visit on my global travels bucket list and hopefully tour there, my first time visiting, would be the Miyazaki Studio Ghibli Museum in Japan, because he has a whole damn museum dedicated to his work.
Yeah,
and there's
and
no one else
rightfully
in that
so.
museum. It's entirely all about him, because he is like a god over there, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
This man is so absolutely brilliant. And Dom, I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this, because I think if you enjoyed this film, yes, this is his most notable film. I mean, arguably there's a big three, right? You have your My Name is Totoro.
My Name is Totoro, this, and would you say
I would say Princess Mononoke. Or
yeah, that
Kiki's
makes sense.
Delivery Service. Those two.
Kiki's Delivery Service has gotten a lot of hype, but I also just want to dive into like some of his newer ones, because his newer ones I feel like is the ones that not a lot of people are talking about. You know, you've got these.
There's one called The Red Turtle, which I really want to watch.
Was that him? Was that him? I thought that was another animation studio.
That was Ghibli. He had a hand in it. I don't quite think he like,
because I know that even though he's a founding member, he didn't direct every major Studio Ghibli movie. So like I feel like we do have to differentiate between like specifically the Miyazaki movies versus just the Studio Ghibli movies.
I just feel like he's such a big, but I know he's a part of the process of pretty much every single. I mean, in his older age, he's obviously slowed down a bit. The man's 79 years old.
Really, I mean, he just came back out of what, like a 5-year retirement or something like that.
But he's still pumping out amazing material when the moment strikes, when the iron's hot.
Literally. And from what he's saying about his next movie, I can't wait for that whenever that comes out. But so people, I guess that should fill you in a little bit about what we're talking about today. We're talking about the legendary Hayao Miyazaki and his very, very prevalent animation studio that he created, although maybe not as prevalent to some as it should be, that being the incredible Studio Ghibli. But Chris, before we actually dive into the conversation, we once again couldn't do this alone because we were perpetually lonely and we need other people to help validate us. We got another guest for today.
That's one way to put it. But you might not be too wrong. Yeah, today we are joined from hopefully what I hope is going to be a budding friendship. I've always wanted like a true friend from across the pond, mostly just so I can say that, but also because I've always loved.
You've always wanted to say that.
I've always wanted to say that. And how American am I for saying that? And maybe Jimbob right here can sort of be like, oh man, what am I doing? I'm dealing with these idiotic Americans. What are they going to say about Spirited Away? There wasn't enough action sequences.
Live from England, welcome Mr. Jimbob of Jimbob Talks Movies. What's up, buddy? Happy to have you here.
How you doing, guys? Thank you very much for having me on here. Super excited today.
Oh,
of course, man, and it's a pleasure to have you. We've been trying to get you on the show for I think the better half of 2 months now.
Roughly around that.
It's good to finally make this work out. I mean, there is a bit of a time difference. Dom and I just woke up. You've probably done a lot with your day already.
I have, yeah. I've gone shopping. I've looked after my kid. I've done a lot of stuff already. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon over here.
Yeah, you're getting ready to wind down by all intents and purposes as far as my schedule goes. But we're happy that you made time for us, because it is a Sunday. And I don't really know how England's doing with the whole Corona thing, because all America wants to talk about is themselves. And so, I mean, it seemed like you went shopping and stuff. So how's everything going with you? And why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, how you've been handling this pandemic, and sort of, because we worry about the people we like and we meet, and
Okay.
about your channel, dude.
Yeah, well, throughout the pandemic, it's been difficult. Obviously, you get the people who don't know the meaning of the word social distance. And since I work in a retail environment as well, I have to deal with the people who just don't listen, don't wear a mask. So yeah, job's stressful, but you got to take it with a pinch of salt and just try and get through your day. My
Yeah.
channel, yeah, I talk about pretty much anything. I like a huge variety of anime, sci-fi, action. I just like anything, pretty much anything. I'll go and watch anything at the cinema.
Yeah, it seems like you kind of recently, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I stumbled upon you because of a Death Note review that I thought was
Yeah.
a really cool, interesting take. So is
Oh, thank you.
anime a new thing for you, or is this like a new thing for your channel, or what's like your relationship with this medium?
Well, it's basically it's very, very new actually. Like that was the first time I ever saw Death Note. That's why I called it the greatest anime ever on my video title, because it is the best I've seen so far. It just randomly picked it up from my friend because he was like, "Why don't you like any of this stuff?" Because my friends in school all grew up with stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh and Dragon Ball, Pokemon, Digimon. I was the only one that actually loved Digimon. Like everyone else in my class loved Pokemon. I was the Digimon nerd.
Dude, I
And
love
then,
Digimon. Agumon, come on,
oh,
man.
yes, good choice.
He's the goat, dude. Digimon, yeah, Digimon was a cool one. I also loved Yu-Gi-Oh. I also love Pokemon. I've kind of always, not that I didn't enjoy American animation, or I guess more
Mm.
like Western animation, but for something about like the Japanese influence, it always had a hold on me as a little kid. Like I grew up watching Toonami. I don't know if you guys had that in England on
Yes, we
Cartoon
did,
Network.
yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up watching all that stuff where I fell in love early on with like Naruto and Dragon Ball Z and One Piece and all like the, I guess now classics that were 20 years removed from their original air dates. So for me, this is like, I'm very excited to finally bring some of this to our channel. But it's interesting to
Mm.
have kind of like you and Dom here who are a
Thank
little
you.
more newer to this medium. So I'm pretty excited to get into this, man. And thanks again for joining us. That's Jimbo Talks Movies on YouTube, everyone. Go drop him a sub and check out some of his reviews.
Thank you
Absolutely.
very
Yeah.
much. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
course, man.
And so I guess in order to kick this off before we actually get into the topic of conversation, I usually like to ask this question of all of our guests, which is kind of like, what's kind of your, specifically at least for pertaining to this topic, which is what's your earliest memory of watching an anime? And what do you think about it is it that spoke to you personally that like made you really want to get into it?
I really don't know, to be honest. Like, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, back in school, it was Digimon, and that was pretty much the only anime I saw other than Pokemon up until my late 20s. But there was something about Death Note in particular that that spoke to me. I mean, I find out that the show's about a guy that can write names in a notebook, and that person just dies instantly. That immediately struck me as like, oh, that's cool. So I just gave it a watch, and yeah, I had major problems with what happened in the second half of the season. I'm sure a lot of people do. And but yeah, there was something about Death Note that just struck me, and it had to be my first review of an anime on my channel. I just had to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
glad
how
you liked
good
it.
is the writing and the intensity between, the two main characters? I mean, it's just like a battle of the wits, unlike any
Yeah.
that I've ever seen, really. It's
It really is, yeah.
it's brilliant. Dom, I'm actually curious, like, about you in this question that you posed to our guest. I don't think I know this about you.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because the whole thing with me is for the longest time, it wasn't that I was anti-anime. It was just the fact of like, it was just one of those things I didn't watch. And it's funny how between obviously meeting you, going away to school, and then coming back, I've kind of like begun to step more into it. Like this is actually for the movie that we're talking about today. This is actually my second Miyazaki movie that I've watched. I've watched the live action Death Note, but I also did watch a lot of the stuff that you guys watch. Like I watched a lot of Pokemon when I was a kid. Bakugan was a big one for me. I could not get enough of that shit. Like I'm like these little toys that pop up into these giant creatures that fight. I'm like, let's go. I've always been a Godzilla guy, So like I've slowly kind of under the radar been a fan of more Eastern animation and storytelling sensibilities. It's just it really took a little while for it to really hit my mainstream though. But now that I'm getting into it, I'm definitely developing a little bit of an appreciation for it. Let's say, as everybody knows, Parasite, like almost everyone else, was one of my favorite movies of last year. I really want to get more into Bong Joon-ho and his sensibilities as a director, but
Yeah,
if we could just
more to that side of the world,
right. But if we could just get into Miyazaki for a bit, specifically, well, after Death Note specifically, again, the only thing that I've seen of Death Note is the movie that I know is so what's the word I'm looking for? So hated by so many of the
I'd say
original diehard fan base.
too as well.
But yeah, definitely divisive. Again, it's exactly like you said, Chris, before. If you go in not knowing a single thing about anime, then it's actually not too terrible a movie. It's for anybody who actually likes it, that is like, oh, okay. And the funny thing is that director was actually directing Godzilla versus Kong, which I find to be like the funniest thing. But
that's interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's Adam Wingard, who I believe directed that movie The Guest with Dan Stevens.
Yeah.
So but if we're talking about Miyazaki for a second, it's funny because for so many anime that people love, specifically, I would say that Americans have fallen in love with. Chris, I know you and I have a lot of friends besides you who are just very diehard anime based, but it's funny because Miyazaki has been very, very, very critical of anime just in general. And the funny thing is that Miyazaki was actually known for criticizing the current state of the anime industry because he claimed that animators were very unrealistic when it came to creating people. I believe his direct quote was, if you don't spend time watching real people, you can't do this because you've never seen it. Some people spend their lives interested only in themselves. Almost all Japanese animation is produced with hardly any basis taken from observing real people. It's produced by humans who can't stand looking at other humans. It's why the industry is full of otaku. I don't quite know what that means, but okay. Yeah, so it's
Did
so
you just say a word that was really bad?
No, I didn't. I actually just wanted to look it up. It just said otaku, which is basically like the term, the Japanese term for like just basic consumers, is it? But like typical like consumers like us Americans, we're just like, we just need entertainment. Give me more. Give me more.
That makes a lot of sense.
I want to use that word now. Now that I found that, I'm like, ooh,
I like that word a lot.
Every time I see somebody on the internet that I'm not a fan of, I'm like, otaku. That's perfect. Dude, like we're taking it. We're taking it.
That sounds like a merch design. I love that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Dude, we gotta make a shirt with that word on it.
That was a good quote.
That was
a
awesome.
Good quote. But you know what? Let me just say this, because a lot of the traditional anime, the animes that I think are now becoming modern classics, to name a few, Naruto, One Piece. Yu Yu Hakusho is a big one. Hunter x Hunter. Those are
Full Metal
like
Alchemist.
Heroes. Full Metal Alchemist. Right. Those are all like the hero's journey anime.
Right.
And so they're set in these fantasy worlds, so there can be some forgiveness there.
Right. I know Attack on Titan is also getting its way up there too.
It is, but that's still airing, so I would say it's a little different. But the thing is, it's just like the characters are very much so cartoons and not real people.
Right.
And that's fine, because American, cartoons do the same thing. Like, there's no one in real life that you can meet in the Ed and Eddie universe who's actually like that. Those are just like some ridiculously absurd characters. So when I think it was refreshing when I saw a movie called Akira, which is
I've heard Akira is a big one.
1980 animated film, and it is brilliant. Each still is hand drawn, and it's just like you can feel the love in every single like frame of that movie. And that was when I first got
Taika Waititi's live action adaptation of that.
I can't wait for that.
If it ever actually happens, because Disney's got them under lock and key right now.
Yeah, but hey, man, if it does happen, it's going to be really, because there's so much richness there in the sense that they feel like real people. And that was the first time I saw an anime film or TV show that I was like, wow, these aren't just like American cartoons. These are like, wow, these are like real people with real emotions. And then I stumbled upon a show called Your Lie in April, which is a brilliant drama, a coming of age drama, and there's nothing fantastical about it. It's a 12 episode Japanese limited series, anime series, and it is just heart-wrenching, it's emotional, it's brilliant, and they're human. And then I was like, okay, all signs were pointing towards now I have to get into Miyazaki and I have to get into Studio Ghibli, because this is like his bread and butter. So I'm glad you said that, because now that just kind of confirms what I always kind of felt, even though, and we'll talk about it in a few seconds here, Spirited Away gets very anime, it gets very crazy. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
She still feels like a real person going through something crazy, not a cartoon character going through something crazy. But Jimbob, man, how do you feel about all this?
How do I feel about what? Sorry.
Sort of like, like Miyazaki, and do you feel his characters are rooted in reality, or do you think that that's just kind of like, do you think that translated his vision there? Or do you disagree with it?
No, I don't disagree with it. I think it's quite accurate. I mean, obviously, in Spirited Away, Chihiro, is that her name? The little girl?
Yeah, I believe so.
Although she has a lot of aspects of an anime character with the loud, with the loud shouting and the facial features and everything. Compared to a lot of animes that I've seen, TV wise in particular, like she's pretty much grounded in reality. Like I think every character in the film is like, you don't see the typical. You know, when you're watching anime and you see like they have these really over the top reactions to every little thing that goes on. You
Yes.
don't really see that in this one very often.
No,
I don't really think I see it in any of the Miyazaki movies that I've seen, which
Yeah.
is really
None that I've
fascinating.
seen. Yeah, it just feels like real people
Yeah.
reacting to like these crazy situations. And so I think it's time to dive into the only Japanese film to ever win the Oscar for
For
best
best animated feature,
picture
which is
feature.
a big thing to talk about.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
I think I know what it is.
Yeah.
yeah, I think you do too. Let's talk about Spirited Away, man. Don,
Yes.
you want to
Yeah.
start this one, or where do you want to go with it?
It's funny because, again, for the longest time, I had not seen a single Miyazaki movie. And then last year, I actually watched his most recent, not his most recent one. So he made 2 movies in 2013, but he spaced them out, one of which was nominated for the 2013 animated feature Oscar and lost to Frozen. The other one was nominated the following year and lost to Big Hero 6. Those were The Wind Rises and The Tale of Princess Kaguya. And I remember I was just clicking through like the summary because I'm like, yeah, this guy Miyazaki, I've never watched a single one of his movies. I've never been into it, but these all seem like movies that would be like really up my alley. I'd seen clips of them on YouTube. The animation looked absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. And I watched The Wind Rises. And I think it was the first time that I'd ever seen an animated biopic, but with like, I guess there's literally no other words that I could use to describe it. Like the majesty of a live action movie. Like, cause it's a fictionalized biopic of a real life person who designed, who designed one of the biplanes that was used by the Japanese in World War II. And it was really, really fascinating because for an animated movie, especially for an anime, technically animated movie, it was very quiet. It was very subtle. It was very sweet. It was very down to earth. There were no poppy, flashy moments. The characters, even though they were animated, felt like I was watching real people. And I was like, whoa, it's something new, you know? And obviously I'd heard about Spirited Away. I feel like everybody who's in our field has heard about Spirited Away. It's kind of like one of those like rites of passage you have to overcome.
Yeah.
And so I finally sat down and watched it yesterday. And needless to say that subject matter wise, it was very different than The Wind Rises, considering it's about a little girl who discovers like this alternate realm that is possessed by spirits. It's funny, when I wrote my review for it yesterday, I kind of likened it to like one of those 80s dark fantasy movies, which those all had the same premise. You know, regular kid finds a portal or something into like a different world, and now as a result has to find his or her way back. You know, it's kind of the premise for the never-ending story. It's almost the exact same premise for Labyrinth. You know, all those 80s dark fantasy movies. And so I found it very interesting that this movie kind of followed that same trajectory. But again, like you guys were saying, even though it's very anime in nature, even though it's got some very over-the-top, rambunctious, larger-than-life characters and these larger-than-life, crazy animated designs, there was still a humanity to it, and there was still a very down-to-earth nature about it. Like, whenever I was watching that little girl, I never felt like I was watching a cartoon character. I still felt like I was watching like a real person going through those situations. And it was amazing because to me, whenever I watch animated movies, I'm always able to like, because I grew up watching animation. So like anything animation I'll watch, but I've always had that like thin distinction of knowing that what I was watching was hand drawn. So as a result, like, I'm not going to obviously, even though, you know, I love these characters and I love a lot of animated characters more than I love a lot of just real life people in general, you know, just considering what people are capable of. Yeah, I always had that distinction that I was like, okay, at the end of the day, these are hand drawn and not real people. But with these movies, it's like, holy shit, like I know what I'm watching is hand drawn, but is there really distinction? You know, like, hey, your comment, like maybe you guys could talk about that and elaborate on that just a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I can, because to me this is like one of the ultimate coming of age stories. You know, we have our main character, Chihiro, and you know, if I said that wrong, it's, you know, whatever. Don't burn me at the stake. But I mean, I will say, it's just like amazing the way that he uses these crazy characters and these crazy sort of like, you know, images and situations just to show that like, well, I mean, her whole life was born in one place and now she's moving and she does not want to move and she can't understand why she's moving and she can't understand that her parents have to do this. You know, we've all been in that situation of being a little kid and having our parents put something on us that we just had to get over, but it's just a part of life. But when you're that young, you know, it's like difficult to understand. And in this film, they also introduce like, okay, so she meets that boy in the beginning. And so it's like, it all just seems like a rite of passage into like growing up. And it's just like the way that this is interwoven with the craziness that happens in the actual spirit verse, I'll call it, that we get into. It's like you almost forget that it's really just tackling just, your typical coming of age story, but just in a way that I have never seen done before. And it really blows my mind when you like sort of dissect the message behind each individual frame,
Yeah, the interesting thing is that, again, like as I was saying, like it almost had the exact same setup for any of those movies. Like they stop in front of this like weird tunnel and they go through, and then the parents start eating, and I'm like, oh, they're gonna turn into animals. I don't remember if it was like somebody had like kind of told me something, or like I've read the basic summary, or I just seen enough movies that I was familiar with the plot setup, and I was like, oh, they're gonna turn into animals, and then like the spirits start popping out everywhere, And it's funny because I almost likened it to the spirit world from Avatar, which I think is kind of fitting because that's kind of almost exactly what this is, where the spirit world is kind of meant as like a refuge place, like outside of space and time, but still within our dimensional plane as far as that goes, for like the spirits to like come and rest and relax from all the human interference. Again, it's a little bit anti-humanistic, but at the same time, it's very humanistic because it shows that all these spirits have like humanistic personalities and they still have humanistic flaws and everything. And it's really funny because, again, you're seeing this little girl run through this area, with like these giant talking frogs and dragons and this one weird squat witch lady and giant babies and a whole bunch of other craziness. And I'm just like, oh man, I'm just along for the ride, Jimbob, maybe you could talk a little bit about like your relationship with this movie.
Well, I think what I like most about it is the fact that I think it's the world building aspects around it, because when I first watched it, it kind of reminded me of Coco, like the, as you said, there's like a refugee or whatever it's called for like spirits. Coco did something similar. This, I think, ups the craziness to about 100. And I think that's what kept me invested most in this. I just watched all this weird stuff happening, and a lot of people could be put off by that sort of stuff. They're like, hang on, this film's weird. I'm checking out. Me, it's like the crazier, the better.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I go into a lot of movies too. But I think it's also not just because there's a lot of craziness going around, because if there was a lot of craziness, then to me, like that's not what makes this a good film. I think it's because it does still at the end of the day have those universal themes, family, friendship, coming of age, meeting your first love and having it be in like a weird scenario. This is why I also liken it to a lot of those 80s dark fantasies, because a lot of those 80s dark fantasies were also coming of age parables. Like the whole thing about Labyrinth is that people have talked about that and said, oh, it's just her hitting puberty. The fact that she like sees this like super kind of attractive figure that's like tempting her and seducing her, and it helps that it's played by David Bowie, who was like a huge icon at the time. So I just find that really funny. But Chris, I wanted to bring it over to you though, and just wonder, like, so the interesting thing is that this seems to be the most widely recognized of all of Miyazaki's work. Whenever you talk about Miyazaki, whenever you talk about Studio Ghibli, this always seems to be the first recognized. And the problem is that because I have only seen 2 of his movies, I can't really comment on why I think that really is. So why do you think that this is usually like his most widely recognized go-to, when I assume you've seen a lot of other of his,
Yeah, so I've only seen the big 4. This is something I've been meaning to check off my list for a while, but a year ago I had only seen Spirited Away. So I feel like I'm coming along, and I want to know more than just the Miyazaki Studio Ghibli films as well. I want to really get to know this studio like the back of my hand, because everything I've seen, I've been impressed. And a big reason why I've only seen 4 films is because I just kind of like, I'm like, okay, well, I could re-experience the magic of something that I already know is an amazing ride. And so I just get sucked into the same. It's like binging a sitcom for me with these Studio Ghibli films that I've seen. I just, it's comfort food. And I think the reason why is because even though like the story beats are things we've all seen before, in any coming of age film, really, you can only tackle so many different things. I mean, sure, people can grow up in different places. People can grow up with different living situations, but everyone grows up. Every human being grows up. So there are some similarities there that we all will encounter. It's just kind of the way we encounter them, which is why I think this film is so fascinating. Because I think this film is like a roller coaster that just keeps going up until like the last 5 minutes, and then you quickly drop down.
Right.
And so while you tack on these new heights and you keep getting up there and the altitude's increasing, and that G-force rush when you drop is going to be insane, it's still rooted in reality. You're still coming down. You know what I mean? You're still going back to Earth. So that's why I really respect this film, because it does put you in some crazy situations, and you see the craziest looking characters, and it is literally a wild ride. I mean, she rides a dragon at some point in the film.
Yeah.
And it's just like, through all of that, though, they're still tackling these issues of growing up in such a way that it like they don't step on each other. You know, the fantastical adventure and the magical still waking up here in the States, the magical charm does not overlook the real world applications of like she's moving on to a different part of her life and she's a kid and this is weird and this is different for her, and nor does that step on the magic and the craziness of the journey she goes on. So to me it's just like this beautiful web that Miyazaki just intricately weaves, and it's just so seamless, man. Like it's just like I don't know how you make them work together so perfectly, but he does. Does that make sense?
It does. It helps also that it starts off with the metaphor, to me, the very brilliant metaphor of they're moving to a new place, and she doesn't necessarily want to. She wants to go back to her old home. You know, like that's a very easily translated metaphor. You know, where the idea
it roots
is
you in some reality before you go on
definitely before you get into the craziness, you know. And then obviously they find the tunnel and she finds herself in a whole different scenario when she tries to find her parents and they've turned into pigs, and she's like, what? They're like, that just reminds me of a very nightmarish book that I read when I was real little about this one kid that's I don't know. I always feel like pigs are treated unfairly as far as that go, because obviously, you know, they're most always associated with like just being disgusting and being slobs, and I've never been a fan of that, because I don't know, I kind of like pigs. They're kind of adorable, you know.
He uses pigs a lot, by the way.
Yeah, so I find that really interesting. And then like how the idea of the bathhouse for spirits, how they need to like cleanse themselves of like, you know, earthly sins and everything. You know, I felt like that was really cool, you know, and like with the no face spirit, with like the idea of just endless consumption, you know, that seems to be another continuing thing, you know, endless consumption. It's funny because Akira Kurosawa, I know, was a guy who was very well known for taking things that he loved about Western sensibilities and culture and bringing them back and almost remodeling them with Eastern sensibilities. You know, you can see that in every one of his movies. And what interested me the most about this movie is that with this movie, that's what Miyazaki seemed to be doing with this movie, you know, taking a lot of Western sensibilities and but slapping them with like an Eastern coat of paint, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, can I, before we toss it over to Jimbob, can I read a quote from
sure.
Miyazaki about this film that I looked up that I thought was really powerful, because it kind of ties into what you were just saying. So Miyazaki states, I created a heroine who is an ordinary girl, someone with whom the audience can sympathize. It's not a story in which the characters grow up, but a story in which they draw on something already inside them, brought out by the particular circumstances. I want my young friends to live like that, and I think they, too, have such a wish. So it's like, it's about coping, really, if you think about it. She's not happy about moving still at the end of the story, but she learns to deal with it, because what she lost, maybe not ever seeing her parents again, well, it could be worse, is what I get from it, you know?
Right. Yeah. Which again is a very, very mature thing to do, because so much of, to me, Western media is about the idea of universal change. You know, a character goes through an arc and at the end they've achieved kind of this enlightenment that we all want, you know, both externally and internally, and as a result, you know, they've completed a change, you know. But Eastern sensibility to me is a lot more realistic, I guess, for lack of a better word, because they show that like even when we make these big changes, they don't change us entirely, you know. We still are those people. It's more so just a matter of adapting to the different circumstances rather than completely universally changing your mindset. And that's what I really liked about this, because throughout it, she never stops being what is her name? Chihiro. She never stops being that little girl, even though like you know, that really interesting point where it's like, you know, the witch that controls the bathhouse and everything. I kind of like it. That was very Wizard of Oz-esque to me, you know, where she's like, oh, here's your new name. You know, you want to work for me? You basically have to give up your entire identity, you know, in order to just become this mindless worker. I was like, whoa, like what? When did this become a statement on American capitalism? Jesus Christ! Like what the hell? And so I thought that was really funny. But then, you know, as she goes along and she befriends all the spirits, you know, I liked that it wasn't a situation of where, oh, this is a total newcomer and you're like the, you know, the pure heroine that's going to save this place. You know, that's not the type of story that this was about. It was like, no, I'm just kind of just another passerby. I'm just like kind of a different kind of a passerby, and how she like formed the different relationships, like with that kid Haku, who turned out to be a dragon. And I'm like, just give me any type of dragon, because that stuff is badass. And also like how she like almost stumbled her way into fucking like cleaning up that river spirit and like purging it of all the pollution. I thought that was really interesting. And also when they first crossed the bridge and she found her way into underneath the steam house with the six-armed man. Fun story about that scene. I actually had to that was actually the final project that I did for my sound for TV and film class. We had to take a scene from a movie and completely strip it of the sound and create a whole new sound design that we had. And that scene where she's creeping down the steps and goes into the what's it called? Into the six-armed man's apartment. I forgot what his name was. And she sees him like doing all this stuff with his arms, like all the little coal running everywhere. I thought that I had to create a whole sound design for that. And it was really, really intriguing. Just like how it really gives you like a whole different perspective, like just how much work goes into just layering the micro sound after micro sound after micro sound, because there's so much happening in the scene, but it's also seamlessly woven together that you almost take it for granted. And it's just like all these different things and how it all comes together. It really creates like a different kind of experience overall in general, you know?
Yeah, Jimbob, man, where's your head at with all this so far?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, honestly, I wish I could talk as long as you two. I think it's really good. Now, I could listen to you two talk for ages.
Oh, thank you.
So, like, I mean, just from listening to you two talk now, I've learned like so much more than I would have put in my own review of this thing. But one thing which I really like about the film as well, I think it's got another huge message behind it, and that message is greed. Because if you look at right at the beginning, there's Chihiro's, I don't know if I pronounced the name right throughout all this. She's her parents start just eating this food when there's no one else there, and then it gets to like the middle bit of the film, and there's now face like dropping all of this gold everywhere. There's like everyone's rambling to get it all at once, and I think the message of the film is sometimes if you let greed consume you, it can get you in some deep shit, and it did, because now face started literally swallowing people, and I thought, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you went there, because I have another Miyazaki quote. I don't want to, dumb this down with Miyazaki quotes, but he had a lot to say about this film, and these are things that I've kind of like, in conversations with other friends throughout time, they would like bring these things up to me. So he actually says Shishiro's parents turning into pigs symbolizes how some humans become greedy.
Oh, okay.
At the very moment Shishiro says there is something odd about this town, her parents turned into pigs. They were people that turned into pigs during Japan's bubble economy of the 1980s. So there's so much in this. There's the coming of age aspects, but then there's also, his personal history growing up in his country, and it's like there's like a social commentary level to it as well. And it's so funny how, even though I don't know if Western capitalism was in his mind when he did that, it does translate. It really, like Dom said, it really does translate.
It translates almost a little bit too scarily, but it's funny how, well, the thing that I like is that, I guess the thing that I like about certain other parts of the rest of the world is that here, whenever it seems like I mean, again, it factors also into the state of criticism here. Whenever we criticize the country, it always feels like it's like comes from one place of like bipartisan nature. It never feels like anybody like actually wants to examine both sides of the issue and actually contribute anything, and mostly just feels like they're just shouting into the void, just for their sake of their voices to be heard. But the thing that I enjoy so much about Miyazaki is that his films actually do feel like interesting introspective criticisms. Miyazaki has been almost outspoken when it comes to his thoughts just on politics, and that's the thing that I kind of like, is that with here in America, the idea of just like wanting to actually speak intellectually and wanting to like speak out as far as like how you feel about certain things just seems to have become like it almost looked down upon, which is like, oh, you're stupid for wanting to try and actually be intelligent and be a part of the conversation, but the rest of the world doesn't look at that, and that's kind of like what I admire about that, kind of the brash nature of it. It's something that I've seen a lot about like almost every other type of, what's called global animation, like just most recently, like that movie, I Lost My Body, that Chris and I, we watched last year. That was a very honest, emotional movie. Very different type of
Jimbob?
Yeah.
So say again, sorry, mate.
Have you
I
seen
Lost
I
My
Lost
Body.
My Body?
No, I've never seen it actually. I've never even heard of it until now.
Great. It's right on Netflix. You should absolutely give it a chance when you get it.
Yeah. Where were you going with that? I'm curious to see how you're going to
tie because the interesting thing is that in 2013, several Studio Ghibli staff members, including Miyazaki, criticized the Japanese Prime Minister's policies because there was the proposed constitutional amendment coming out that would allow what's it called? what's it called, that would allow the current prime minister to revise the clause which outlawed war as a means to settle international disputes. And like Miyazaki was very outspoken about that and said that the prime minister wished to leave his name in history as a great man who revised the constitution and its interpretation, and also expresses disapproval of his denial of Japanese military aggression, stating that Japan should clearly state that they inflicted enormous damage on China and express deep remorse over it. So I find it interesting too, because that also deals with obviously, the role in history, and how you just look at the cancel culture movement that's going on right now, and they're saying how it's almost like they just like want to forget about history and rewrite it. But Miyazaki has always been one of those guys that's been like, no, we need to accept that this is our history. This is the stuff that our country has done. And we should also accept that it was not right. But by doing that, it shows that we can actually move on and actually show that we can learn from that and actually keep going forward and become better as a nation and a people, And so I've always had that deep sense of admiration as far as that goes, because that is something that other parts of the world seem willing to do, that us as Americans just do not seem willing to do. We would so rather pretend like something doesn't exist and that something's not a problem until it becomes so big that we can't, that we are forced to deal with it, And I just find that very interesting, because that's something so far with the two of his films that I've seen that has been very, very prevalent in both those movies.
Yeah, I think there's a bravery to him that I think a lot of people, maybe not like us, because we are all, cinephiles, we all have YouTube channels and we critique this on a daily basis. So I feel like there's a bravery to his work that if you're just a normal viewer, and especially maybe I can only speak in my shoes, like an American kid who loves anime and just wants a wild ride and a wild journey, sure, that's there at the surface level and hits all the beats of an anime film that you would want to see hit. But if you really read into it and you really dissect it, I mean, there's like a bravery in there, unlike one that I've seen from, hell, even like American just filmmakers in general, to speak out, because, I don't really know. I know Japan is a democracy, but I know that we still here in both of our countries have a little bit more freedom too. So to be that bold and to be that outspoken, to me, the only word I can use is bravery, because and it's not that hidden if you really like start to read into the subtext, it doesn't. But again, though, nothing steps on the toes of each other. Like, you can, I think, get this film at face value for a wild ride. You can get this film for the coming of age story, and you can also take away, like you said, Jimbob, like you said, Dom, you can take away the social aspects, the greed, the commentary. I don't know how he does this.
Yeah, well,
it's also amazing in a sense how masterful he's able to weave all these layers,
Yeah, but it also ties into the idea that I think a lot of people that I have a problem with, a lot of American critics, is like, well, what's the first thing, Chris, this was even literally just on our watch along the other night, what is the first thing that everybody says whenever a movie gets even a little political? Oh, I wish that people would keep politics out of movies. But like, you watch this movie, which is so freaking good because it has all those political undertones, regardless of whether or not on the surface. So I think it's people need to change their mindsets and understand that, like, no, because I've said this before, to me, movies are not, to me, the best movies are the ones that do have a message of some kind, whether you realize it or not, And so I think it's the idea that it's not a matter of movies need to not have a message in it at all, because I think that's counterintuitive and defeats the entire purpose of the filmmaking and the artistic process in general. I think it's a matter of they need to be more tactful about it, is what I'm saying, because again, that's the beauty of this movie. You could watch it, and like Chris was saying, you get a wild ride, you get a coming of age movie, and you get a lot of political and thematic undertones, but it's not like shoving your face in it, Now, the other thing too that I wanted to talk about is that just because Miyazaki is capable of being political does not mean that he's not going to, that he's also not very personal, because again, that's another big part of the artistic process, is just being personal. Because I was just looking at the next film that he came out of retirement to do, which he said was most likely going to be his last movie. It's called How Do You Live? It's going to be based on a book of the same name. It doesn't say what it's about, but the big thing that I got from it is that Miyazaki specifically said that he was working on the film for his grandson as a way of saying, Grandpa's moving on to the next world soon, but he's leaving this film behind because he loves you. And I thought that was really, really impressive, because again, how that even ties in with this movie, and also again, how that ties in with Avatar, is the idea of this movie is kind of trying to make a statement about spirits, and just kind of like, if anything, I feel like it's kind of trying to like break down the barriers, Joe, that like, yeah, we've come to like know these spirits as like these crazy phenomena, like almost worship them as like these deity-like figures, and we know to like stay away from them because they could be scary. But I like how he like kind of tries to break down the barriers and is like, no, they're just like us, and the idea that how he translate that across and is like, yeah, just because we when we die again. It's another thing that I love about Eastern philosophy that I honestly wish was incorporated more so into Western culture, you know, because I have my own thoughts on religion and how that goes as far as it works. But kind of how he breaks down the ideas of heaven and the afterlife and like moving on, while also at the same time making it like slightly more palatable, which is like, it's not, the idea is that obviously, you know, when you die, you're not gone forever. You're simply just moving on to what's next. And we don't necessarily know what's next, you know, but it's the idea that, you know, you're simply moving on to the next life. And just because you can't interact with those current people doesn't mean that there's nothing next, you know? And I find that really, really fascinating. And I've always liked how, you know, the Eastern take on that has always been to be so much more palatable and so much more introspective. And that ties in a lot with this movie, you know?
Yeah, man. That's
a powerful quote right there. I can tell that got to you.
That is so. That just shows that confirms what I've kind of always thought about people as creative and as prolific as Miyazaki, in the sense that like he has the foresight to realize like, well, it's going to happen either way, so I might as well give my grandson something he can have than rather try and prevent it. Like, it just shows maturity. It shows it's got to be a sad script to write. It's almost like he's writing like he is writing like a farewell letter to his grandson.
I mean, he's no spring chicken. I just looked. I think he's like 79. He's gonna be like 80 next year.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, Jimbob, what do you take about all that, man? I'm blown away by that. That's brilliant.
You know what? I'm actually lost for words. I mean, just listening to what you just said is like a whole ton of information has just gone into my head and come out both ears, and I'm just less speechless. I don't know what else to add to that. You just put it perfectly.
Jimbob, why do you think it is that we have been having a hard time speaking about this movie without bringing Miyazaki up in almost every sentence?
Can you elaborate? Sorry.
Yeah, because I feel like, you know, we could talk about, like, for example, we could talk about Parasite, right? A more recent film, and Bong Joon-ho's name might come up once or twice, but like every move he makes in that film, we could just talk about the film though. But like when it comes to this movie, for some reason, our conversation keeps going back to like Miyazaki's touch on it. Like, I feel like you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's just his style of filmmaking and the messages he puts behind it. I mean, I think he's really the sort of guy that will just sit down and think, all right, I've got to come up with something mind-blowing. I've got to come up with a message that will reach out to all kinds of audiences. And I think that's why the conversation keeps coming back to him, because, you know, he's a guy who does his homework.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm kind of glad that you kind of said that, because my last and final Miyazaki quote that I wanted to bring up as we sort of wrap up this episode here is... And this is something I had just learned literally this morning when I was just reading a piece on him. Forgive me, I forget the article. It was one of those like entertainment Facebook story. You know, once you click on one thing, Star Wars, then you get all these weird ass articles about Star Wars nonstop. So, you know, I guess I Google search Spirited Away last night, and so Facebook fed this to me, and I'm actually really glad that like them mining our private data is a thing for once, because I got this awesome quote. Miyazaki says, "I don't have the story finished and ready when we start working on a film. I usually don't have the time, so the story develops when I start drawing storyboards. It's not me who makes the film film makes itself, and I have no choice but to follow it."
Wow,
see,
that's
crazy. I read that quote
bold right there.
I've read that quote somewhere before, and I wasn't sure who it was until you just said that.
Oh, now you know.
But, you know, mind
Doesn't
blown
it make
again.
sense?
Yep. It does. And it's funny because so much of it's funny because, again, that just goes so much against what we've been trained, you know, because we both went to film school. We were both trained, you know, the whole idea is, you know, never start working on an idea until it's fully concrete. But this just shows that, like, no, this is the power of the filmmaking process. It is all about collaboration. It's about, again, it's what Tarantino was saying, is that he never understood why the emphasis was always on achieving the final product. So much of the beauty of filmmaking is about the journey throughout. You know, you find some of the best things once you're actually in the process. So yeah, that basically backs up everything that I've been saying as far as that goes.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you brought up Tarantino, because I was going to bring that up about him, dude. It's so true. And it's like, I think a lot of the great filmmakers, I would assume, you know, the sweat, the tears, the labor put into it is almost better than the end product. The magic of being in the moment, because once you're out of the moment, it's gone. Sure, you can go back and watch it, but you're out of the moment, you know, you're not creating it anymore. So it's on to the next one, that hunger, that fire, which even as an 80-year-old man, he wants to create this final film. You know, he never stopped creating. And so that quote to me just shows like, and I would love to like, I wonder if there is a documentary about this movie. I'd love to know like what started it off.
I think
There
there
is.
is.
There probably has to be, right?
There has to be at this point. Like there's the
Yeah.
documentary made about like every mainstream filmmaker. There has to be.
Yeah, I gotta watch that because I just want to know like how he got to this incredibly layered and this incredibly in-depth piece, right? We've been speaking about the coming of age. We've been speaking about if you just want that surface level wild anime ride on like anything you've ever seen, you have that. And we've also been speaking about, you know, the social commentary, and I'm sure we can even find more layers to this thing. You know, I'm sure we're missing something. We have to be. But it's just like, dude, I mean, I don't know. So in conclusion, I think, what are you guys like plans? I know, Jimbob, you said that this was your first Ghibli movie, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and first one by this guy in particular as well. I mean, I didn't even know Ghibli was even a thing until you told me the other day, and so I did some research on it, obviously, and it's quite different to standard anime TV. Like it's closer to reality.
Which again, I think is like part of what Miyazaki goes for, because again, the whole thing, and I guess my final thought on it before we get into final star ratings is that Miyazaki, again, he always goes for realism above all else, because he feels that that is the quintessential part of storytelling, which I do agree with. You know, you can get as crazy as you want, but at the end of the day, there has to be some level of realism, reality, relatability, you know, like kind of all those three words kind of gel together for me, you know. And if you don't have that, you know, to me, that's that I feel like that to me is a big problem with most American anime, with both just American filmmaking in general. So much of American filmmaking, they just want to give you a sensibility that's so different, you know. They want to like distance you from humanity in order to like give you that traditional escape, you know, because Chris and I have talked about this. So many Americans, they just want to come home after a long day of work and just tune out with comfort food. They just want to tune out and forget about the real world, you know. But again, with those Eastern sensibilities, the rest of the world, they seem to want to remind you, but not in a way that like reinforces the negatives of the world, the stuff that reinforces like the positives of the world, you know, like the fact that the world can be a beautiful place if you choose to make it, you know. And so that's kind of like what I really admire about him from both.
Kind of like what I was saying about capitalizing on a rainy day in our pre-stream conversation. I never understood why people let a rainy day bring them down. Take that day and make something productive of it, you know, make it a positive day. So I got to ask both of you guys before we head into our final thoughts and our you know, we get out of here and enjoy the rest of our days, or Jimbob his night. Do you guys, now that we've sort of dissected this movie for, you know, the better half of an hour, do you guys have plans to go further into the Studio Ghibli universe, or like where are you guys heads at with this? Do you need some time to sort of like take it all in, or
the way that I'm looking at it is in a strange way. I'm looking at every Studio Ghibli movie now the same way that I would look at a David Lynch movie, where every time I watch one of them, I'm looking, okay, I understand that I'm not getting something that's like anything else that I've watched, so I want it to be an experience. So I'm going to space it out. Whenever I feel like watching one, I'm going to watch one, and I know it's going to be great. I just recently watched my 5th David Lynch movie, that being Lost Highway. And like, it's one of those things where it's like, I can just tell, like, okay, each time I watch one of these is going to be an experience. So I want to make sure that it is an experience, you know?
Okay, but you're going to keep going though.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to keep going. The stuff that I've seen so far is too good to like not keep going with it.
Gotcha. And just learning about him too makes me want to go and stop rewatching my comfort
fascinating
food.
Guy.
Because I am that turn the office on after a long day and just, you know, or turn on the same 4 Ghibli films I've seen after a long day.
Or that same episode of Lost that you'll watch over and over again. The constant.
You know what? These movies are challenging.
Yes.
Like we have been talking about. So Jimbob, man, like what do you think your future with the Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki franchises are?
I think me and this franchise are going to have a very good relationship, because I watched this film and it absolutely, you know, it gripped me in ways which I never even thought before. Like, as you guys said, the director does his homework. It not only told a story which was beautiful and bizarre, it also told the story through visual effects. The animation is beautiful. And yeah, I'm looking forward to watching more. In fact, I might even go and watch one right now as soon as the stream ends.
Nice. Let us know what you watch. And
definitely let us know what you watch.
I think we found our title for this episode, Spirited Away, Beautiful and Bizarre.
Yeah.
Or I love that.
Or even better, Miyazaki, Beautiful and Bizarre.
I love that. That was that's a good quote, man. That's hey, you know what, Jimbob? You know, you didn't say that much, but what you said was awesome, and we appreciate you being here, man. So
yeah, thank you very much.
Being said, dude, you're always welcome back on the show. This was an absolute blast. It's nice to have someone who wants to sort of challenge their typical viewing palette with me and Dom as we, continue this quest to just grow and develop as film appreciators and hopefully future filmmakers ourselves. So with that being said, Jimbob, we'll start off with our guest first. Why don't you give us sort of your conclusion, your closing thoughts? And on our show here, we like to rate films out of 5 stars. So take it away, man.
So overall, I think it's emotionally gripping. You've got a coming of age story, beautiful and bizarre, and you just watch it and you get immersed in this beautiful world, which is still grounded in reality. And I'm going to give it 5. It's got to be a 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. 5.
Yeah, it's so as far as I go, like I said, I've seen very, very few movies that I would consider perfect. This movie comes close. It comes very close. But I think the thing that unfortunately is because I think that with some of the fantasy elements, they don't necessarily, like I said, it's just a matter of I still just have to wrap my mind around it a bit. And as personal as this did get to me, I feel like it wasn't quite as personal as it could have been, if that makes any sense. So that's why I only give it 4.5 out of 5. But at the same time, this was still an absolutely magnificent movie. Miyazaki clearly shows that he knows what he's doing when it comes to the animated medium. And yeah, I can't wait to see what's next.
It does make sense, Dom. I do understand that. I think there comes a point in the third act where the fantasy kind of takes over and for a second kind of takes you out of the social implications and the coming of age implications. For me, though, that does not bother me because I have always been along for that type of anime style ride since I was a youngin'. And so I was just okay with, let's ride on a dragon and sort of forget about all the coming of age things for a few minutes because it was awesome and it was visually stunning and it was beautiful. And there's such a fantasy and almost like a charm, like that Harry Potter score that I'm not the biggest guy of the movies, but I love the score because the score even transports me to this mystical, magical world. And so everything about this film fires on all cylinders. So while I do agree with what you just said, Dom, it is a 5 out of 5 for me because it is the best Studio Ghibli film that I've seen. But just so everyone else knows, it is a very tight race. Yeah. Any given day, you catch me on a different day, I might say something different. But for a while now, it's been that this has been my number one, Studio Ghibli film. Although that is a very liquid list because all these films have something amazing.
They're all
right.
They're all special. They've all got a lot to offer. And it's funny because again, I may have only given it a 4.5, but I still put it. It's my number 2 favorite movie of 2002. So there you go.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I only had one movie above it. That's Alfonso Cuarón, to me, his best movie, Why Tu Mama Tambien, which is the movie he did right before Prisoner of Azkaban.
And you just watched this yesterday.
I just watched this yesterday.
And it permeated.
It's my number 2
list.
of 2002, no question. Granted, 2002 is not the strongest year for me in general. I think the only other really great movies that I've seen from that year, it's Adaptation, Catch Me If You Can, and Lord of the Rings: Two Towers are the other ones in my top 5. And then I also really like Road to Perdition. But yeah, I still got a lot from 2002 to watch.
Which is funny because that's my least favorite Lord of the Rings film, but that's a podcast for a different day.
I still love that movie,
Jimbob,
but
man,
underrated.
Yeah. I like that whole trilogy, but that's a podcast for a different day. Jimbob, thank you again for joining us, man.
No,
we had to work out the time, and it's a Sunday, and you made time for us, and we always appreciate that, dude.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, I mean, since I've never done anything like this before, it's I'll listen to you guys talk, and it's fascinating. How long you can babble on about something. I thought, I want to be like that. And so the more I do this with you, I'm hoping I can match, the amount of time you can babble on too.
I think
hey, man, you're always welcome on. And we're always happy to have people come back. And, listen, just because we can fill the airtime doesn't mean when you listen back, we're saying anything important.
It's true. Well, because our goal, I feel like, is to be entertaining first and foremost. Yeah. We're trying to be informative and entertaining. As long as we can hit those 2 goals, we're good. So now, Jimbob, before you head off, where can the good people find you on the interwebs?
Where can the good people find me? They can find me, Jimbob Talks Movies. I have a YouTube channel and Instagram of the same name. Twitter, Jimbob's Talks. So check me out if you like me. Hopefully you did.
Cool. And one last time, why don't you tell people a little bit about the vibe of your channel and all that it is you do over there?
Yeah, I mean, my style of filming, I like to crack a lot of jokes, a lot of dark humor, and hopefully just get a laugh out of people. I mean, the people who have watched it so far, I said I'm good, and well, I hope that's true. I hope they're not just saying that.
I mean,
Yeah,
I would.
but if you like jokes, if you like fast-paced talking, because I talk a lot, I use a lot of cuts, so it sounds like I'm talking non-stop. I like to talk about anime and yeah, all sorts of stuff like that. Just if you like that sort of stuff, name's right at the bottom of the screen.
Cool. And guys, you know, we like to think we only bring on talented people to the show. So please go give us a subscribe and
we're the best when it comes to just picking out the best talented people from the internet. But so people, thanks again for watching another excellent episode of the Talkin TV channel. I'm Dom. That's Chris, movie nerd, TV nerd. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram at Talkin TV, no G, at Talkin TV or at Talkin TV podcast. Leave us a like. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of this video. Let us know what your favorite Studio Ghibli movies are. Make sure to click that like button and that subscribe button. Click the little bell next to it in order to get notifications for the newest videos. We've got new content that we try to release every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And Chris, without further ado, I think there's only one thing left that I can say in order to wrap this up.
You're right, but I'll say it for you, Dom. Be sure to find us on Instagram at Talkin TV Podcast. That's TALKIN, no G. We are very active over there. We also have a Facebook. So we're not just on YouTube. But if you guys know that, you know that we're not just on YouTube, because if you've been listening to our audio, if you've been watching some of our posts, some of our mini videos on Instagram, there's a way we like to end very important things on this show. And this, I think, was a very important and fun episode. So, Dom, without further ado, take it away. Do you have a message for the people here today?
Watch more fucking movies, people. We out.